Okay. It says that I am live now, so hopefully everything is good. Okay. We are on. It looks like the connection is fine. We are on chapter 22, and that this chapter is called Burn It and Be Damned. In 2019, thanks to the channel's continuing success, 2.5 million subscribers and counting. Ruby and Kevin bought a new house in Springville, just a block away from the first 8 passengers house, and a far cry from our modest beginnings. Let me know if you can hear me on YT. This new house was a sprawling 3-story structure with an epic tree filled backyard made for entertaining. Hello, hot tub with 7 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. Well, 5 full and 1 half. It was more than spacious enough for our family and our adorable new Cavapoo puppy, Dwight, who'd we'd gotten after Nolly passed away. All the girls had bedrooms upstairs, sharing the top floor. Ruby and Kevin's master suite occupied the main floor, a buffer zone between the gender divided levels. The boys, Chad and my youngest brother, had claimed the basement as their domain, complete with their own bathroom, pool table, and foosball table, and even a full kitchen, although Ruby quickly commandeered it for extra freeze drying storage. That sounds like a really nice house. Ruby's 2 large freeze dryers ran ceaselessly, humming away 24 hours a day, preserving everything from leftovers to bulk bought sale items. Nothing was safe from their grasp. Leftover steak, vegetables on sale at the store, entire meals would be processed and stored away for some future crisis that lived only in Ruby's imagination. She even experimented with freeze drying greens, grinding them into a powder that could be reconstituted later. That actually sounds pretty interesting. All for its grandeur, the house felt oddly sterile. Spacious yet confining, modern yet soulless. A house built for show, not for living. Ruby's obsession with camera friendly minimalism meant our walls remained bare, save for the occasional picture. The lighting in the house was clinical, rows of bright white studio lights instead of warm, homey fixtures. It made everything look clean and pristine, but it lacked warmth. Like everything else in our lives, it was designed for the camera, not for comfort. We weren't even allowed to decorate our rooms or put up posters. Ruby feared tape would rip the paint or nails would damage the walls. The whole place felt more like a showroom than a home. Perched up on the upper floor, my bedroom overlooked the backyard, a slice of nature framed by 2 windows. From my vantage point, the view was a tapestry of green. Dense box elder trees lined the creek at the bottom of the garden, their leaves rustling in the breeze, creating a natural curtain that partially obscured the fields beyond. On clear days, I could just make out the neighbors' horses grazing in the distance. For months after we moved in, I slept on a mattress on the floor, topped with a comforter that I struggle to remember clearly now. I think it was striped blue and white, but the details have faded with time. It's funny how such a central part of my daily life could become so hazy in my memory. And to be honest, I didn't love having my own bedroom. I missed sharing with my younger sister, whose bubbly energy had always helped take me out of my dark thoughts. At night, I'd often leave my windows open, letting the gentle murmur of the creek wash over me. The soothing sounds of the rustling leaves and trickling water gradually eased my restless mind into sleep. Come morning, I'd wake with itchy eyes and a stuffy nose, courtesy of the box elders in the yard, but I welcomed these minor discomforts. In this tiny house, a monument to artificial perfection, nature provided my only taste of authenticity and warmth. Those open windows became my lifeline, a portal to a world that still felt real and alive. unlike the sterile emptiness that surrounded me indoors. See how she really like all those details about the backyard? Like that is really good, vivid imagery where you can literally like put yourself exactly where she's at. That's why I'm enjoying this book because it's so vivid and its descriptions that you're where she is. And that's what I like about it. I'm really enjoying that. On March the 3rd, 2020, my 17th birthday, Ruby finally allowed me to paint my bedroom wall. I chose a geometric blue-green triangle pattern, a small rebellion against the stark whiteness that dominated our home. It felt like a breath of fresh air, a tiny slice of personal expression in our tightly controlled world. But the respite was short-lived. Just 10 days later, the world ground to a halt as COVID 19 swept across the nation. If life felt suffocating before, it was about to become truly unbearable. As the pandemic took hold, Ruby continued posting to 8 passengers, but her demeanor had shifted. The channel she'd painstakingly built from the ground up now seemed to hold less allure for her than Jody's Connections venture. This is going to be big, Ruby would say about Connections with the same fervor that she once reserved for our YouTube channel. Jody is changing lives. She's changing me. It was true. She had changed. The yelling had stopped. She seemed calmer, more in control. She no longer flew off the handle at minor infractions or disagreements, but something else had taken in its place, something worse. Ruby's punishments became more psychological in nature, more focused on our emotion and minds than our bodies. Punishments themselves took on more elaborate, almost theatrical quality. Instead of swift, straightforward consequences, a flick on the lip or a slap on the cheek, Ruby began devising complex object lessons meant to teach us about empathy, responsibility, or whatever virtue she felt we were lacking. These often involved grand gestures or prolonged periods of deprivation, all designed to make us truly feel the weight of our transgressions. May 2020, in a video titled What We Haven't Told You, Chad dropped a bomb that he would soon detonate our family's carefully curated image. He mentioned casually that he'd been sleeping on a beanbag in the basement floor for 7 whole months. On Jody's advice, Ruby removed Chad's bedroom privileges as punishment for his continued defiance. His options: a pull out guest bed, an inflatable mattress, or wherever became a beanbag in the basement. 7 months, 210 nights, sleeping on a beanbag. Ruby saw nothing unusual about this. Chad acted like he didn't even care. It was a master class in emotional suppression, a skill we'd all been forced to perfect. When he let slip during filming what his current sleeping arrangements were, he did it so coolly. I doubt Ruby even really noticed, but Ruby's new editor did, and he made Chad's revelation the focus of the video, misguidedly thinking it would be interesting content. Ruby didn't hesitate to post it. Why would she? Jody had been pumping her full of misplaced confidence, convincing her that her unique parenting philosophies were not just acceptable, but admirable. As the upload bar reached 100%, Ruby sat back, satisfied. In her mind, she wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a truth teller, a revolutionary parent. Ruby, high on Jody's toxic positivity, was about to proudly display her son's dehumanization for millions to see. Even Dwight, our dog, had more comfortable sleeping arrangements than Chad. The internet went ballistic. Ruby's face paled as she scrolled through the comments. YouTubers and TikTokers were accusing her of child abuse, but this is all wrong. They don't understand. Ruby, Kevin suggested, maybe we should take the video down so we don't lose subscribers. No, Ruby snapped. Jody said we need to stand firm in our truth. We can't let the haters win. That one video burned down the 8 Passengers YouTube channel overnight and cost our family 90% of our income. Hundreds of thousands unsubscribed, and brands once eager to associate with our wholesome family image couldn't distance themselves fast enough. Overnight, we went from wholesome family influencers to social media pariahs. Ruby seemed oddly defiant regarding the crash and burn of her own channel. People have been asking for years how I've raised such well behaved children, she declared, chin held high. Now they know if they can't handle the truth, that's on them. Financial concerns, once the cornerstone of our family's decision making, now seem secondary. It was as if Jody's approval, hey Shorty, it was as if Jody's approval had become the only currency that mattered. In my mind, Ruby wasn't just brainwashed. She had become a devoted daughter to a mother figure who seemed to demand nothing less than total obedience. As for me, I was secretly thrilled about our new status as YouTube's most unwanted. Did this mean we'd finally get our lives back? Could I actually eat a meal without it being broadcast to millions? But on the other hand, watching our livelihoods circle the drain wasn't exactly cause for celebration. As for Chad, well, he seemed almost amused by the whole thing. Revenge is sweet. Ruby kept the channel up, a ghost of its former self, posting only occasionally. Mainly, though, people were hate watching 8 Passengers, still lining our pockets, digging deep into the archives, trawling through 5 years of our lives with a fine toothed comb, looking for more evidence of Ruby's cruelty. Give me 1 second. I got something stuck in my throat. I had just eaten. Thank you so much, Lisa, for all the love on the video. Hey, Mandolin. I'm so sorry you're having a bad day, Mandolin. You can email me later and we can chat about it. Some videos became infamous. Ruby threatening to behead my youngest sister's stuffed animal, an eye for an eye punishment after my youngest sister demanded something. I remember that day. The horror in my little sister's eyes, the mocking determination in Ruby's voice. Ruby's rationale seemed to be, you unalive someone else's possession, so how would you feel if we unalive yours? Her approach intended to teach consequences, totally disregarded the emotional capacities of a young kid because for a child of 5, a stuffed animal is more than just a toy. It's a source of comfort, a loyal friend, a crucial coping mechanism for navigating the big, scary world around them. Threatening to guillotine a beloved buddy wasn't just a punishment, it was emotional terrorism. Now, years later, thousands of strangers were revisiting that moment. Ruby posted a vlog where she bragged about how she wouldn't bring a packed lunch into school for my youngest sister who had forgotten hers that day. Ruby explained how the teacher had called her to say she was uncomfortable with my youngest sister being hungry and would Ruby like to drive her lunch over. I remember these two situations being talked about on TikTok. I told the teacher my daughter is responsible for making her own lunches in the morning, Ruby said in the video. The natural outcome of forgetting your lunch is that you're going to be hungry. Ruby went on to say that she'd hoped no one shared their lunch with her child that day. She should go hungry in order to learn her lesson. Ruby tried to defend herself afterward, saying the school was a 45-minute drive from our house. There were only 2 hours left of school that day. But that did nothing to calm down the masses. All they'd heard was Ruby's cold contempt for her hungry child. Angry viewers didn't just leave mean comments. They went after remained of our family's livelihood. People bombarded BYU with calls, emails, demanding they fire my dad from his professor job. Someone even started a change.org petition accusing my parents of ABUSE. And just like that, Ruby and Kevin were canceled. The truth was out there, replayed in countless reaction videos and commentary channels. Ruby and Kevin sent cease and desist letters to content creators who dared call her ABUSIVE. They were desperate to silence the criticism, to stuff the genie back into the bottle. Things got real when CPS showed up at our house. They didn't find any evidence of child ABUSE, but the damage was done. There was no going back to our picture perfect online image ever again. Watching all this unfold, I felt conflicted. Part of me was glad others finally saw what I had known for years, but I was worried if the public shaming would only make Ruby double down on her strict methods. Would the very attention meant to help us end up making things worse? As the backlash intensified, Ruby's rage burned brighter, fueled by a mix of self righteous and victimhood. In her mind, she wasn't a controversial figure being held accountable. She was a martyr, crucified for her unwavering dedication to tough love. I am a mother. I know best. The very public outcry meant to shake my mother awake for driving her deeper into delusion, and instead of acknowledging her mistakes, Ruby burrowed deeper into the safe space of Jody's poison dart philosophy. Connections became her bunker. Right? This is more than just tough love. Like letting your child starve because she forgot her lunch, like that's a little harsh. Especially, she's a little girl, like 5 years old. Like, come on. I know you want to teach your kids responsibility, but even grown-ups forget to do shit. Where was I at? Okay, Connections became her bunker, a fortress against the onslaught of public condemnation. As Jody played her part with calculated precision, never questioning, always supporting, offering comfort to Ruby's wounded ego. She validated Ruby's every action, every decision, and encouraged Ruby to move on to greener pastures. Oh, wow. There were only three of us. My mom grew up with seven of them, so to hell with eight passengers. Why not focus on the Connections classroom, the place where she could truly carry out God's will and share the truth about divine motherhood with Jody at her side? Chapter 23, Obedient Little Drone. Summer rolled around, Ruby leaning into Jody's approved strictness, declared that our favorite TV shows were banned. No more SpongeBob, no more Simpsons. In addition, it would be an electronics-free summer. Away went our iPod touches, our gateway to music apps and games, locked in a safe in Ruby's closet. I didn't mind so much. I was always more of a reader. But I remember the mixture of disbelief and resignation on everyone's face as Ruby gathered up our electronics. These were our connections to the outside world, a small taste of normalcy in our household. Oh, wow, 15. Whew. I couldn't imagine having that many kids. I didn't The summer stretched before us, seemingly endless without our usual digital distractions. I started crocheting and taught my sisters too, but Chad was absolutely livid. How dare Ruby lock away his precious Xbox? With the determination of a master thief and the stealth of a cat burglar, he'd find ways to break into it, liberating the Xbox for clandestine gaming sessions in the dead of night, frantically trying to level up before the house stirred to life. Chad was still in therapy with Jody, but he'd figure out how to play along, how to agree with everything she said while still living by his own rules. I, on the other hand, was earnestly living by Connection's rules, almost addicted to my weekly self flagellation sessions with Jody. This week, I had black and white thinking 7 times, I reported to Jody proudly, and I caught myself telling myself stories 5 times. You're not getting it yet, Shari, Jody snapped. This is about more than just tallying thoughts like an obedient little drone. I'm sorry, I mumbled, my voice barely above a whisper, cheeks burning with shame. Stop apologizing. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, Shari, she barked, her voice rising. I was completely lost. What does she want from me? I can't even get it right. Look, it's much easier to point out everyone else's distortions than to confront your own, isn't it? If you truly want to grow, you must be willing to look at the ugly parts of your psyche. For clarity, I asked her exactly what kind of ugliness I wasn't seeing. You see how focused you are on getting approval from me, she said. You're still in self adulation, Shari. You still need to hear that you're the best, the cleverest. Your areas of weakness are compassion and empathy, but all you seem to do, even now, is look for ways to boost your own ego. Frustration welled up inside me. I had been trying so hard, putting in so much painful introspection, doing my best to correct everyone's distorted thinking. I'd probably lost more friends in the past month than most people do in a lifetime, but I still wasn't getting it right. I was just a self-absorbed adulator, a garbage person living in complete distortion. That night, I sat at my desk, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the pages of my journal as I poured my heart out, my pen scratching furiously against the paper. Yeah, there's a lot of people that really should not be parents. A lot. And this is a small excerpt from her journal. She writes, Jody thinks I am relying too much on external validation. She said I was an obedient little drone focused on getting approval from her and Ruby. Then she said I'm just not understanding compassion and empathy. It was awful. I don't want to be a cold and unfeeling person, which is how she described me. The next week, my heart pounded in my chest as I confessed to Jody how much her words had affected me. Jody, I said, my voice shaking slightly, I wanted to tell you how much it hurt me when you said I was an obedient little drone. But you were right, and I'm very grateful for your honesty. Hearing truth is the only way we can bring about change. I never said those things, Shari, she replied calmly. Excuse me? That's not how I talk. You must have misinterpreted my meaning and then remembered it as fact. Oh, okay, I said. Tendrils of doubt wrapped themselves around my mind. But Jody seemed so sure, so confident in what she was saying. I guess I must have hallucinated the whole exchange. After the session, I took a look at my journal, flipping to the entry I had written right after last week's call, just to check, and there it was in black and white. Obedient little drone, unempathetic, not getting it. I stared at those words, a seeking feeling in the pit of my stomach, thoughts like little tiny spiders crawling up my spine. How many other times had she twisted my own memories against me? After that, I became hypervigilant, less focused on finding evidence of my own distorted thinking than on monitoring hers. I zeroed in on the ways she didn't play by her own rules. It became a game, spotting her inconsistencies, slyly pointing them out to her, innocently calling her out on her own lies. During a session, Jody mentioned how a family friend had visited her and brought their young kids. Afterward, Jody noticed the remote control for her curtains was missing. I just know those kids took that remote to spite me, she said. How did you know they took the remote? I asked coolly. I just know. Isn't that an assumption? One of those stories we tell ourselves without facts? I felt a rush of adrenaline using Jody's own language to correct her. Assumptions are different when you have evidence behind them, Sherry. She said, the evidence being that those kids have a pattern of being vindictive troublemakers. The remote showed up under Jody's couch a week later. The final straw for me was when Jody started talking about how babies are distorted. Those tiny little bundles of joy with their soft, downy hair and their wide, trusting eyes, according to Jody, they're manipulators who feel entitled for their mothers to come and tend to their every whim. Lord, the babies are narcissists too, huh? The problem with society today is that we coddle children. She told me we give them everything they want and then we wonder why they grow up to be so selfish and lazy. But they're just babies, Jody. They can't help it if they cry or need things. Jody's eyes glinted with something dark and unsettling. Sherry, you think a baby doesn't know how to manipulate, how to get what it wants? I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. I think a baby cries because it needs food or comfort or. Jody waved her hand dismissively. A baby cries because it's entitled and it knows someone will come running because it believes that the world revolves around them and their needs. Unless you train them, it hold on. Unless you train it not to be entitled, you're just reinforcing that bad behavior in them. It's our job as women and mothers to break that cycle of manipulation, to teach children from an early age that they need to earn their blessings. Only then can we hope to create a society free from distortion. So babies need to earn. They need to earn the reward of comfort and and food and their diaper changed. That's wild. Bile rose in my throat. Who is this monster? In my mind's eye, I saw a baby denied the comfort and love she so desperately needed. A baby left to cry it out by her mom, her wails trapped in the emptiness of a dark room. That baby was me. A fire lit in my chest, and as it grew, it burned away the fog. The invisible shackles binding me to Jody disintegrated and turned to ash. No more would I let her poison my mind. It was as if I had been holding my breath, and now I could finally exhale. I told myself then, unequivocally and forevermore, that never again would I trust one single word that came out of that woman's mouth. As I finally started to break free from Jody's hold on me, I began to ask questions. How had I and so many others been so vulnerable to being manipulated like someone like Jody? Had the emphasis on obedience that I'd had growing up with created a follow the leader mentality that made it all too easy to fall under the sway of someone like her? Ariel, we're reading the book about Shari Franke. It's called The House of My Mother, who claimed to have special knowledge and the ability to guide us towards righteousness. Can you hear me, Buffy? Cults. Yeah, you got to look it up, Ariel. CULTS are thought to prey on the vulnerable, the lost, the broken. But here's the thing, they can also ensnare anyone who is simply a human searching for meaning, or people who are in state of transition in their lives, young adults coming of age, for instance. Intelligence is no defense. My own father, a professor, was shockingly quick to abandon his own judgment in favor of hers. Our dedication to thinking critically and analyzing complex ideas was the very thing that Jody used against us. She twisted our inquiring minds into knots, using our own logic and reason to lead us down a path of self doubt and self deception. But it was all a lie, a carefully crafted illusion designed to keep us trapped and compliant. For Ruby, the allure of Jody was more about climbing the ranks and amassing power within the connection system so that one day she could glory in on herself. She had always yearned to lead, and the connection system, with its rigid hierarchy and defined steps towards enlightenment, offered her a tantalizing path to power. Ruby envisioned a future where she, like Jody, would stand at the pinnacle, basking in the adoration of followers, wielding the authority she so deeply craved. But of course, that was never going to happen. Jody, the master manipulator, had no intentions on ever sharing her throne. The system she had crafted was designed with a single purpose: to keep herself firmly at the top, surrounded by devoted acolytes who would never quite reach her level. Jody's grip on power was absolute, her control over her followers unshakable. She had cultivated in Ruby and others a desperate need for approval, an insatiable hunger for enlightenment that only Jody could satisfy. It was a brilliantly crafted trap, and Ruby had walked right into it, dragging our family along with her. Chapter 24: The DEMON in My Room. Jody's paranoia about her position at the apex of connections was palpable. In a move that revealed both her greed and her fear, Jody demanded that all her certified life coaches sign a new contract that no one could use her teachings or materials as independent life coaches unless they paid her a cut of their ownies. Yes, Ruby Franke. Her daughter, this is her daughter's book, Shari. It was a watershed moment. The majority of Jody's followers finally confronted with the reality of Jody's boundless greed, balked at the demands, seeing the contract for what it was: a desperate attempt to maintain control and monetize every aspect of their hard earned skills. One by one, people started walking away from connections, choosing their freedom over Jody's increasingly unhinged requirements. Not all of them, though. My mother, in her blind devotion to Jody and her teachings, signed the contract without hesitation, hell bent on cementing her position as Jody's most loyal disciple. Of course, the narrative spun within the connections bubble was vastly different from reality. We were told that Jody had fired all of those disobedient life coaches because they were too distorted to truly understand and implement her teachings. It was a classic example of Jody's gaslighting techniques, rewriting history to paint herself as the victim and the sole arbiter of truth. As I pieced together the real story that those coaches had quit once they saw Jody's true colors, I felt a mix of admiration for their courage and deep gnawing frustration with my parents. Why couldn't they see what was so obvious to others? I found myself wishing desperately that they had followed suit, that they had walked away, but they didn't. They remained steadfastly loyal to Jody, and by extension, to the warped reality she had constructed. Their commitment to this destructive path stirred something within me, a need to assert my own identity, to push back against the suffocating control that had seeped into every aspect of our lives. My rebellion started small in ways that might seem inconsequential to an outsider, but felt monumental to me at the time. One of those small acts of defiance was a friendship with Derek. It started innocently, though, I suppose, a friendship that turned into something else. Derek was high up in the church, a family man and landowner in his late 40s. In May 2021, right after I graduated high school, he asked for my help with social media strategy for his company, offering me a side gig to help him put together videos for YouTube. Having just turned 18, it meant a lot to me that a respected adult like him had singled me out and recognized my skills and talent. After my first meeting with Derek, he couldn't stop singing my praises. I have to say, Shari, you really impressed me. He said once, the way you think, the way you see the world, it's refreshing. You're mature, way beyond your years. Oh, I'm just normal, I said, embarrassed. Derek chuckled, shaking his head. No, Shari, you're anything but. He asked me to tell him about myself and my family. He seemed intently curious, genuinely interested in getting to know me better. My family, we don't get along the best, I said with a shrug, and he seemed surprised. Tell me more, he said, remembering how Mr. Heyman and I had had such a positive source of paternal support for me. I decided to open up just a little. My mom's super involved with a group called Connections. Have you heard of them? Oh, I know Jody Hildebrandt. She used to be my neighbor, he said, and I can tell you, she was not very well liked. She wasn't? No, not at all. I can't stand the woman personally. Hearing that from Derek, I knew right then that he was someone I could trust, someone I could confide in about what was going on at home. A friend. Derek and I fell into a routine, meeting at his office once a week to work on his social media projects. I felt very safe with this regular middle aged guy with a happy family and a nice wife he'd been with for years and years. Although sometimes he did say things that felt just slightly off color, remarks bordering on flirtatious, like complimenting my appearance a bit too enthusiastically or letting his gaze linger a moment too long. Each time he made one of those comments, I felt a twinge of unease. But I tried to brush it off, reminding myself of his upstanding reputation. When I finally worked up the courage to tell him to stop telling me how pretty I was, he apologized profusely, almost overdoing it. He assured me it would never happen again. He started doing little things, kind gestures that made me feel seen and cared for. A DoorDash delivery when I was having a tough day, a little shopping trip if I needed something, even if I didn't. One day he told me, his voice low and intense, I'm the only one who really cares about you, Shari. You know that, right? He was manipulating her too. Each time he sent me gifts, I felt a little guilty, pressured somehow. This man who was showing me such kindness, but for some reason, sorry, but for some reason, I wasn't always sure that I liked it. One day, I accidentally called him Dad, and that was the first time I saw Derek get angry. I think we're more than that, aren't we? He said, his face a storm cloud. I didn't mean to offend you. Please don't be mad. When I eventually told Ruby that I was working with him, she had a fit and forbade me from seeing him any further. I have a really bad feeling about this guy, she said. Jody and I don't think it's appropriate for you to be working with him one on one like that. Tell him you'll have to stop. Okay, sure, I'll stop talking to Derek. I lied. I was sick of people telling me what I should do. I was 18 and old enough to make my own decisions. Besides, I knew why they didn't like him. It was because Derek had been Jody's neighbor and probably knew way too much. That's why Jody didn't want him in my life. Well, guess what? Jody wasn't the boss of me anymore. And very soon, Ruby wouldn't be either. Because I was going to college in the fall, which meant I was an adult now and no longer answerable to anyone except God. So I carried on working with Derek behind everyone's back. And despite the secrecy, it felt nourishing and empowering having his constant support, someone to lean on. Lord knows I was about to need it more than ever. Now we're into part 4. This part of the book is very long, so I don't think that we're going to be able to get through all of it. Let me just look and see how many chapters there are. I think we might be able to get through chapter 30. So let me mark that so I don't. Okay. So we're gonna read we'll see. I'm gonna go to chapter 30 and see where we are from there. Because how long have I been on live? I don't even know. It's 8. Chapter 25, The Ninth Passenger. About 2 weeks after, no, about 2 weeks before my freshman semester started, my phone rang while I was hunting for a last minute college supplies. Ruby's name flashed on the screen. Her voice crackled with a frantic energy. Jody's not well, she blurted out, skipping any pleasantries. She'd been bombarded by the adversary. Her soul is under siege from Satan himself. Shari, he's trying to silence the truth. So she's moving in with us. We're going to help her get better. I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? My mother's unhinged guru was locked in a battle with evil, and her solution was to crash at our place? Yes, she'll be taking over your room, Ruby continued, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. It's the biggest of all the kids' rooms, and you're leaving for college soon anyway. I need you to come home right now and clear it out. Like now, Shari. She's arriving this afternoon. According to Ruby's breathless explanation, Jody was being plagued by nightmares, visions, and crippling bouts of anxiety, clear symptoms of dark forces seeking to destroy the righteous. Jody, handpicked by DEMONS for destruction, urgently needed protection. And Ruby had decided that protection would be us. By the way, we can't talk to Paige or that family anymore, Ruby said, her voice bitter. Paige, our family friend, had been one of Jody's biggest supporters and one of her lifelong serving life coaches until she quit, that is. Wait, I like Paige, I protested weakly. She's nice. Well, Jody was staying with Paige, and now she's in a league with Satan. Mom snapped, as if she were discussing someone who'd committed a social faux pas rather than join forces with the ruler of hell. So that's that. Now hurry up and clear out your bedroom. Jody's arriving this afternoon. Thank goodness she's staying with us now. We'll take really good care of her. I drove home, my mind reeling. Was I the only sane person left in this circus? My room was being commandeered by a woman battling demons. My mother had appointed our family as spiritual bodyguards, and I was supposed to just roll with it, pack up my life, and evacuate my room to make way for our mad prophet. I went home, climbed the stairs to my bedroom, and began stuffing belongings into bags. I couldn't believe the epic battle for Jody's redemption would have to take place here. in my teenage sanctuary amidst my stuffed animals. Glancing over my shoulder every 5 minutes, I half expected to see Jody standing there, her eyes black and soulless, her mouth twisted into a demonic grin. My childhood nightmares made flesh. Get a grip, Sherry, I thought to myself. Even my heart threatened to pound straight out of my chest. Jody is just a person. A deeply problematic person, yes, but a person nonetheless. Is if she is suffering, then we probably should help her. I descended the stairs slowly, lugging my bags behind me. As I reached the bottom, I heard the front door open, and there she was, Jody, standing in the foyer in her khaki shorts, eyes blazing with a feverish intensity, her hair wild like an Old Testament like an Old Testament hermit who'd been wandering in the desert wastes. That's a good description. Oh, I'm gonna watch that. I think I can watch that. The Ruby Frankie movie is supposed to be coming out on LMN this Saturday. So maybe I'll download the app and we can stream it Saturday night instead of reading. Let me know what you guys think about that. We can take a break from reading the book and watch the movie. Shoot. Okay. Hello, Sherry, she crowned, her voice strangely raspy and raw. Thank you for offering up your bedroom like a good Samaritan. I appreciate it. Hello, Jody, I said brightly, forcing an amiable smile. The room's all yours, and get well soon. I watched Jody sweep past me, headed towards my bedroom like a conquering general, and felt a chill in my bones. This wasn't just a temporary inconvenience. This was the beginning of an occupation. Chapter 26. In spirit and in truth. This is a small excerpt from her journal. The house's spirit felt weird with Jody here. Something's going on between her and my parents that we don't know about, and the whole thing is super secretive. I'm trying to spend as much time out of the house as I can. Those few weeks after Jody moved in were a total mind warp, a bizarre, chaotic blur in which each new day seemed to out weird the last. Jody had taken up residence in my bedroom, and once installed, she never left, lingering like a bad smell, while I was relegated to the couch downstairs, a refugee in my own home. Thank goodness for Derek, the only person I could confide in at the time. He urged me to stay calm as best I could, reminding me that in just a few weeks, I'd be as free as a bird, an independent woman at college, all by myself, away from Ruby and Jody. Even knowing that I was moving out soon, it wasn't easy being in that house. Jody was in a dark place mentally. Night after night, she'd fall into these mysterious trances, not quite seizures, not quite sleep, but something eerily in between. It almost sounds like she was kind of falling into like a weird meditative state, maybe. Like, yeah, like a meditative state, but maybe not like a good meditative state. Like something demonic was possessing her during those times. I don't know. That's what it sounds like. Ruby and Kevin, suddenly embracing a level of mysticism I'd never seen before, would conduct what they called spiritual interventions. Yeah, she was definitely being possessed by some demonic spirits. For her, hushed, intense sessions meant to heal her. Ruby soon decided it was best for her to bunk with Jody, so her friend didn't have to suffer through the demonic night terrors alone. I never remembered her being that sympathetic towards me when I was having similar issues as a kid, but this was different, I guess. Apparently, Jody was experiencing incredible detailed visions. In some, she saw Ruby walking on water alongside Jesus. In others, she envisioned herself riding a massive lion named Charles through the gates of heaven. Charles had since gained something of a CULT following on Reddit among those tracking my family's story. All of those fantastical visions were meticulously recorded in a hefty leather binder that Jody referred to as the pen papers. In her delusion, she believed these scribblings would one day be elevated to the status of Holy Scripture, personally validated by God Himself. I felt helpless watching all this unfold. Who seemed like a shell of his former self wasn't doing anything to stop it either. I wanted to intervene, to shake him out of this compliance, but I didn't know how. I yearned for my dad to find his backbone, to step up and be the protector he was supposed to be, to shield us somehow and convince Ruby that Jody needed the kind of care that we simply weren't equipped to give. In the end, he never even tried. Meanwhile, Jody and Ruby hunkered down in their upstairs sanctuary, rarely leaving except for occasional ice cream pilgrimages to Dairy Queen. Their dietary habits were a cardiologist's nightmare, a steady stream of sugar, saturated fats, and fried foods, liberally garnished with Jody's sole contribution to our household, gallons of ranch dressing. Pam, Jody's oldest and dearest friend, high up in connections, was always popping by with a case of soda and a high pitched hello that set my teeth on edge. The three of them, Ruby, Jody, and Pam, would hole up in my bedroom for hours on end. They were they went boating in Lake Havasu in Arizona for a week and would make little shopping trips down to Mexico, coming back with grocery bags full of pills. And when I asked about it, Ruby claimed it was all part of their grand scheme to stockpile antibiotics for the end of days. It was as if they'd formed their own exclusive apocalypse collective, and the rest of us were decidedly not on the list. It sounds to me like she was going through some sort of a spiritual psychosis. That's what it sounds like to me. This whole end of days and stocking up and like bunkering down and making sure that you have lots of, you know, medicine and antibiotics, and that she was, seeing demons and angels and all this weird stuff. Sounds like she was having a spiritual psychosis. They, like many doomsday preppers in the LDS Church, were obsessed with a book called Visions of Glory, published in 2012. Was this the same book um, that lady Lori um, read whenever she unalived her kids? You know who I'm talking about? She was another LDS person. Lori can't think of her last name. And I want to say Chad Harwick. They were like married to different people and ended up, both of their partners were schmurdered, and then they got together and then they schmurdered her kids. Look it up. I'm pretty sure that this is Lori, I think it was Lori and Chad or something like that. Look it up. But I think that this was part of it. The book, not endorsed by the mainstream LDS Church, was a wild ride of near death experiences, apocalyptic visions, and doomsday prophecies. It became the basis for many LDS prepper fantasies, feeding into their fears and justifying their extreme preparations. The book's contents ranged from New Age style spiritual encounters to graphic descriptions of impending disasters, foreign invasions, viral plagues, massive earthquakes devastating the entire United States, including our own Wasatch Front. You know who I'm talking about, right? Lori and Chad. I'm thinking of this book was part of the reason why they ended up. Yes, Lori Vallow. Yes. And Chad Daybell. Yes, them people. They were also members of LDS Church and ended up unaliving Lori's two children or three children because of this whatever spiritual psychosis they were under. And he was supposed to be some sort of a prophet. It was a big story too. So I'm glad y'all knew what I was talking about. Hey Claire. No, I did not hear that, Claire. Yes, there's more. I'm so glad you're listening to me. I really appreciate everybody who's hanging out. It's been so long since I've seen you, Claire. Thank you for joining this evening. Okay, let me figure out where I'm at. It was all very trippy and apparently very convincing to Ruby, Jody, and Pam. Strange as it may sound, I don't think I've ever seen Ruby happier than when Jody was living with us. Battling entities and riding Charles the Lion, she seemed to have a glow about her. She had always complained about her lack of close female friendships, about the loneliness of motherhood, but now she had her girlies. Jody and Pam had become her ride or dies, her squad, her soul sisters. They were the three musketeers. That's what I thought. That's what I thought, Marilyn. I'm so glad. Thank you, Claire. So they were Mormon or they were LDS? I thought they were LDS. Mandy, thank you so much for the gifts and the love. I thought they were LDS. I'm going to look it up in a minute when we get done. Oh, they're the same. Mormon and LDS is the same. Okay. The three musketeers of the apocalypse, ready to follow each other literally to the ends of the earth, or at least to the nearest Mexican pharmacy for another antibiotics run. As Ruby, Jody, and Pam grew closer, bonding behind closed doors and sharing whispered conversations, Kevin found himself increasingly on the outside looking in. He was told that upstairs was off limits. He could leave the house when he wanted, but he couldn't return without Ruby's permission. Even access to the kitchen for meals required her approval, and Ruby dictated and when they were allowed to communicate new house rules inspired by Jody. Ruby even tried to transfer control of the eight passengers YouTube brand to Jody. When our long term manager, Larry, raised concerns about her plans, Ruby dismissed his warnings, claiming that this wasn't about money but about doing God's work. Then they parted ways. Ruby was isolating herself from anyone who might question her increasingly erratic decisions. Relegated to the couch downstairs, I found myself grappling with a cocktail of emotions: frustration, confusion, and a growing sense of displacement. This wasn't just an invasion of privacy, it was a fundamental shift in our family dynamic. I'd grown accustomed to Ruby's boundary pushing over the years, but this, inviting Jody Hildebrandt to reshape our entire household, felt like a point of no return. Shari, don't be blind, Ruby would admonish anytime I'd timidly inquire if Jody was feeling well enough to go home yet. Jody is a powerful being, which is why she is under spiritual attack. See? FLDS is different. That's the one with all the wives. Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. That's the one guy with like the 30 wives and the 80 children, right? The fundamentalist Latter-day Saints is the FLDS. Okay. The least you can do is share your space with her while we fight. Can't you see beyond your entitlement for a moment and think about the bigger picture? Lori Vallow's trial is coming up. We're going to all have to watch that because I can't believe she unalived her own kids for a man. Ruby imposed a gag order on the entire household, insisting that Jody's presence be kept under wraps, as if we were harboring a fugitive. Here we were, Ruby and Jody preaching truth in their connections videos while concealing the juiciest plot of all. Pulling off this charade required some serious smoke and mirrors. Jody was still running her connections Zoom meetings from our house, with Ruby playing sidekick as a senior emotional fitness coach. They'd set up their laptops in separate rooms, backgrounds blurred to maintain the illusion of distance. A slick master class in digital deception. When I decided to film a video for my own channel, which was chugging along despite the 8 passengers backlash, I had to use my sister's shared room since my own bedroom was now a shrine to truth and Dairy Queen. I didn't mention a word about Jody, but before I could upload, Ruby swooped in like a hawk. I need to watch that video before you post it, she said, eyes narrowed. It's okay. I was just talking about getting ready for college and packing list. I don't care. I need to review all content shot in this house. We can't risk Jody's voice slipping through in the background. I'm sure that Jody was behind this information blackout. As cracked as her marbles might have been, she still possessed strategic forethought. Moving in with a client student because she was suffering from mental illness slash demonic attack was not the look she was going for publicly, so she had to ensure she was still projecting power and strength even as her world crumbled around her. For Jody, optics were everything. Another thing she and Ruby had in common. Wow. I think there's a certain level of like preparedness that we should all have, but I do think that there is a little there's people that definitely go overboard. Lisa, no cameras in the courtroom at Lori Vallow's court hearing. That's going to suck. Sorry. Did you email me? Okay. Thank you, Linda. I'll check my emails after we get done on the live. And I'll make sure that I email you back so that you know I received your email. Okay, so everybody is excited about streaming the movie on Saturday. I'll figure out how to do it and I'll add like a link or something to my community channel so that everyone is able to come to the live so we can watch the movie on Saturday night rather than read, okay? The Ruby Frankie movie. Sorry, where am I at? Okay. This home situation isn't healthy for you, is it? Derek said one afternoon. When I'd gone to do some work for him at his office, mainly because I wanted to get out of the house, I shook my head, feeling the tears prick at the corners of my eyes. No, I whispered, it's not. During those 2 weeks, Derek could tell I was very stressed. He was intuitive like that and always seemed to take a close interest in me and how I was feeling. So I confided in him, and he always listened, patiently allowing me to share the pain and confusion of my family life without judgment. I really appreciate, yes, Jody, there's a movie. I really appreciate it when people like listen to what I have to say. They don't try to like offer solution. They just allow me to speak and get off my mind, like what's on my mind, and just hear me. Because sometimes it's not about offering a solution to whatever problem or situation I'm in. Sometimes I just want to be heard. Like I can figure out my own problems and come up with solutions. Sometimes it's just nice to be able to have an outlet to say what it is that you're going through out loud without anyone, offering any advice after that. So I can definitely relate to her feeling like, that it was nice to be able to just say what was going on without judgment behind that. Derek studied me intently. Must be lonely going through all this on your own. His voice was soft, his eyes full of concern. I shrugged, picking at a loose thread on my sleeve. I'm used to it. I wish you had more support, Shari. Everyone needs someone that they can count on. I looked up, surprised by the emotion in his voice. I've never really had that, to be honest. Well, now you do, Derek smiled, his hand brushing mine as he reached for his coffee mug. I spent most of the day at Derek's office, and it was sunset by the time I arrived home. The house was eerily quiet. For once, nobody was home. Taking my chance, I made my way upstairs to my room, figuring I'd take advantage of the situation and grab a couple books. I pushed open the door to my bedroom and looked around. Confused, the room was bathed in a soft glow of candles. The air was heavy with the scent of lavender and vanilla wafting from the massage oils on the dresser. I quickly grabbed what I needed and got the hell out of there, feeling like I had just walked into someone else's honeymoon suite. The only thing missing was rose petals on the bed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the fact that the couch was hurting my back, or maybe it was the sense that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I tossed and turned, thoughts swirling. It must have been around 5 a.m. when I heard a creak of footsteps upstairs. I cracked one eye open, just in time to see Ruby tiptoeing out of my room. Her hair messy, her cheeks flushed, and her robe hastily tied. Heading back to the bedroom she shared with my dad, a strange smile on her face, she looked mischievous. What the hell was going on? Why was Ruby sneaking around in the middle of the night like a teenager trying not to get caught by her parents? Were they really doing candlelit massages in my bedroom? How could this be happening with all of us in the house? In that moment, I felt a bone deep pity for my father, a once proud and rational man who seemed completely oblivious to what was happening right before his eyes. It was equal parts fascinating and horrific. Two women who preached truth while living lies. Hey, Brinzy, don't tell me because this is my first time reading it. So keep it quiet. Shh, shh, shh. We're gonna get to it. Who condemned queerness very publicly in their connections videos while embodying it privately. In my room, on my bed, most likely. The next day, I left the house as early as I could and drove around, going to random places. I couldn't bear to be home, not with all those thoughts in my head. At the mall, I bumped into a couple of neighborhood acquaintances who I knew to be, am I allowed to say GAY, like without being banned? I'll spell it for now. And without grieving too much away, casually asked them their thoughts on Jody Hildebrandt. the life coach. And if they had heard of her, oh my God, that woman is so closeted, said one of them, arching an eyebrow. My other friend nodded, adding that oftentimes the most homophobic people were the ones who are hiding something about themselves. I know my community isn't exactly leading the pride parade when it comes to queer acceptance. A lot of the older folks are still clutching their pearls at the mere mention of it. But times are changing and the younger generation, myself included, see things a little different. Personally, I like to remember that Jesus taught us to love everyone. There was a story that kept coming to mind during this time, the story of Jesus speaking to the Samaritan woman at the well. She was an outcast, a sinner who had been shunned by society, but Jesus looked at her, his eyes full of compassion, of understanding. He spoke to her, not with condemnation, but with love. You should worship in spirit and in truth, Jesus told her. And those words had always stuck with me. Since Jody moved in, I'd been hearing them louder than ever, playing on a loop in my mind, in spirit and in truth, in spirit and in truth, in spirit and in truth. Truth was a word Jody and Ruby wielded like a weapon. But this story reminded me that the truth should always be connected to the spirit, the essence of the divine. People thank God all the time, but do they live by God's teachings? Their words might honor God, but do their actions align with the Bible in spirit and in truth? Their truth isn't just quoting scripture while behaving exactly the way you want to when you think no one is looking. That's the opposite of truth. I asked myself, how would I have felt if Ruby and Jody had actually embraced honesty, practiced the authenticity they preached, and told me and the rest of the family what was really happening between them? And the answer was yes, it would have hurt, but I would have supported them. It would have been preferable to living like this in this house of lies that I couldn't bear to step a foot in anymore. Dirty, shameful ruin. 2 weeks after Jody moved in, college started, which meant I was finally able to escape. Oh, that is interesting, Marilyn. Oh, the joy I felt fleeing that festering wound of a household. BYU, the LDS college where I would be majoring in political science, was close by, only 10 minutes drive up the 89 North Freeway. But still, it felt a million miles away. No more fake smiles and performative laughter to placate my mother and the demon in my bed. Now it was just me, Shari, and her books. Freedom. What a chef's kiss of a feeling. Ruby and Kevin drove me to my college dorm and helped me get moved in, all caught on camera and later uploaded to 8 passengers, which Ruby was still clinging on for dear life. Standing there watching Ruby, all the fake smiles and tearful embraces, feigned material love for me for the camera filled me with rage so intensely it nearly knocked me off my feet. How could she stand there, pretending to be the perfect mother, wavering her beloved eldest goodbye, when I knew all she cared about was the monster in my bedroom at home? As my parents drove away, I stood there, wavering, rooted to the spot I had craved this moment of freedom. Yet now that it arrived, I felt strange. I trudged back to my dorm room, each step echoing in the unfamiliar hallway. The space felt cavernous, my meager belongings dwarfed by the emptiness of my roommate's untouched side. Silence pressed in from all sides. From the first time in my life, I was truly alone. No sibling laughter to punctuate the quiet. No familial routines to fall back on. Suddenly, the text lit up my phone. How's your first day of freedom, Shari? It was Derek, right on cue. Want to stop by the office later? Once you've settled in, I got you some back to school gifts. Remember that North Face jacket you said you wanted? Wow, thank you. See you later. I don't remember the drive to his building. I just remember the way my heart was pounding and how my skin felt too tight, like it might split open at any moment. I wasn't sure why I felt so nervous. In hindsight, perhaps it was my intuition trying to tell me something to turn around, to go back to college, to go back to my college dorm and never talk to this middle-aged man again. But I didn't do that, and by the time I'd arrived, I was gasping for breath, my vision narrowing on to a pinpoint. Shari, what's wrong? I heard him say as I stood at his door. I can't, I choked, my chest heaving. I can't breathe. I think I'm having a panic attack. Derek guided me to the couch, his hands gentle on my shoulders. I tried to focus on his voice, on the steady rhythm of his words, but the panic was rising like a tidal wave, threatening to pull me under. Shari, listen to me, he said, his voice cutting through the static in my head. I think skin to skin contact will help calm you down. Can I take your shirt off? I froze, my mind reeling. No, I thought. No, no, no. But my mouth wouldn't work. The words stuck in my throat. I shook my head, tried to push him away, but he was stronger than me. His grip, iron tight, was around my wrist. Trust me, he murmured, his breath hot against my ear. Just let me help you, Shari. And then his hands were on me, rough and insistent, yanking my shirt up, exposing my bra, my skin. I squirmed, I fought, but it was useless. He was bigger than me, stronger than me, and the more I struggled, the more powerless I felt. See, he said, it's not so bad. Now just relax for me. Be a good girl. His hands roamed over my back, my stomach, snaked up to cut my breasts through the thin fabric of my bra. I felt myself go numb, felt my mind detach from my body, floating up and away until I was looking down at the scene from above. A girl on a couch, a man looming over her, his hands possessive, greedy. This was the first time someone had touched me like this. It couldn't be me. It couldn't be happening. Not to me. That feels better, doesn't it? He asked. And I heard myself say, yes. I heard my voice, small and distant, agreeing with him. I don't know how I made it back to my dorm that night. All I know is that when I finally collapsed onto my bed, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I couldn't feel. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling as the world went on around me. I heard the laughter, the chatter of my fellow freshmen through the walls, but I was separate, cut off. I've sinned, I've thought. I've ruined everything. It felt like a punishment, a divine reckoning for all the ways I had failed, all the ways I had fallen short. In my mind, my frozenness, my inability to move was a sign from God, a punishment for my transgressions. This was the Spirit telling me I needed to repent, I thought. When I finally managed to drag myself out of bed to fumble for the phone with numb fingers, I saw the missed calls, the text from Derek. Where are you? He demanded. Why aren't you answering? Is everything okay? I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. He's worried, I thought guiltily. I should get back to him so he doesn't get more upset. With trembling fingers, I typed out a response. I'm okay. How are you? The reply was instant. Are you talking to any boys? I frowned, confused. No, I typed back. Good, came the response. Thank you, I typed, not knowing what else to say. I fell back on my bed again, closed my eyes, and tried to summon up the image of the Samaritan woman at the well, the outcast, the sinner who had been offered living water, a chance at redemption, but I couldn't find her. All I could see was my own face in the harsh light of judgment, dirty. shameful, and ruined. Is this who I am now? I wondered, a dull ache in my chest. Is this all I'll ever be? Chapter 28, Grateful. College life introduced me to all the peculiar experiences of having a non sibling roommate. To say we were an odd couple would be an understatement. I was the quintessential early bird, greeting the dawn with enthusiasm. She was the night owl of Olympic proportions. Our schedules were so misaligned that I'd often be crawling into bed just as she was applying her makeup for a night out. And I certainly never felt able to confide in her what I was going through with Derek and how possessive he had become since what happened on that first day of school. I had blanked it out, pretended it never happened. I was enjoying a rare moment of normalcy at the campus creamery with a male classmate when my phone buzzed. Derek's name flashed on the screen, and I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. His text was innocent enough, asking where I was, but when I replied truthfully, he didn't take it well. Ah, you're with a boy? You don't care about me anymore? That's not very nice. I stared at the words, a mix of confusion and guilt washing over me. Was I doing something wrong by hanging out with someone else? Logically, I knew I should keep my distance from Derek, especially after what had happened. But there was a traitorous part of me that clung to the attention that he gave me, feeling a void I hadn't realized was there. My own father had become a ghost in our family, more present in his absence than in reality. In comparison, Derek's intent focus on me felt validating, even if it came with strings attached. Maybe I thought trying to rationalize it was okay to keep Derek as a friend. After all, he liked me, noticed me. In a world where I felt invisible, wasn't that worth something? About halfway through my first semester, I went home, partially because I needed to grab a book, but also because I was missing my siblings. I walked through the front door, tentatively calling out, "Hello!" I could hear Ruby and Jody in my bedroom, talking and laughing. Kevin emerged from the backyard. "Hello, sweetie," he said. "You're home. It's so good to see you." I wished I could talk to him, tell him what had been going on with Derek. Instead, I shifted uncomfortably under his sad, listless gaze. "Well, I'm just popping in to say hi to everyone," I said. "That's nice. Oh, and I need to grab something from my room." "That won't be possible," he said, more firmly than was necessary. Why not? Ruby and Jody are in there. They're busy. Busy with what? I thought. Braiding each other's hair, wrestling demon warlords, debating the merits of Dairy Queen's peanut butter bash versus chocolate chip cookie dough blizzards. Which is it, Dad? If you want to go in there, you have to text your mother first and get permission, he said. Then she can tell you a convenient time to get your book. Dad, really? Why on earth would I have to schedule a visit to my own bedroom? Because that's just the way things are now, Shari, he said sadly. It was hard for me to believe that this was the same person who used to delight me with geographical fun facts, impromptu jazz piano sessions, and a childlike enthusiasm for rocks. How quickly minds can become eroded, weather beaten into blank, featureless expanses. I hated to see him in this state. It was a relief when, after texting Ruby and being allocated 5 minutes to retrieve my book, I could hug my siblings and then swiftly retreat back to school, away from my sad sack of a father and the house where nothing made sense anymore. Amelia, it's hard to explain psychological control because it doesn't start with the psychological control, right? Ruby was missing something in her life. She desperately wanted female friendship, that female bond that you have between, girlfriends. She was missing that in her life. And Jody came in and offered her a friendship role, and then slowly broke down her walls and started to psychologically control her. So it happens over time, but it always starts out by the other person giving you everything that you've missed all your life, or you feel like you've missed. So it's some sort of, it's validating that empty piece of you that you didn't even know that was empty until this person suddenly came in and like filled that hole. So I believe that that's how it started, and then it just got worse and worse and worse over time. I mean, I it sounds to me like it was at least a couple of years of mind control. Uh, the movie comes on Sunday, not Saturday. Well, you know what? I think we can still watch it on Sunday. I'll find it. I think we can still watch it on Sunday because I don't usually read on Sundays. So I don't think it would be that big of a deal to go live and just watch the movie together rather than read. So we'll see. If not, we can always watch it Monday. I'll look and see. The movie is about Ruby Frankie and like this whole situation. Thanksgiving was a few weeks away. Would we go to our grandparents' house like we usually did, or would this year be different thanks to our new guests? Okay. Yeah, if we can watch it on Sunday, then we'll watch it on Sunday. In the early years, our Thanksgivings have followed a predictable pattern, alternating annually between Kevin's parents and Ruby's. Those were big, boisterous affairs, each side of the family bringing in its own unique flavor to the celebration. At Kevin's parents' house, the sheer number of people was always overwhelming. With all of Kevin's siblings, their spouses, children, and even their children, we'd easily have more than 50 people crammed into the house. It was chaos, but the kind of chaos that comes with warmth and laughter. The downside, like I mentioned, my grandparents weren't much for cooking, so we often ended up with a spread of store bought dishes that left much to be desired. Oh, Pandora's Box, thank you so much for liking the live and sending a gift. I really appreciate that. Yes, we'll get our popcorn and we'll all watch it together. And we'll be able to like talk in the chat and all that kind of stuff too. It'll be fun. Still, the joy of family connection was always outweighed the culinary disappointments. Ruby's family gatherings were small, but no less lively. With about 10 adults and 20 something kids, it was more manageable chaos. The cooking here was the star of the show. Homemade dishes that filled the house with mouth-watering aromas and left us all in a pleasant food coma by the end of the night. As I entered high school, our Thanksgiving traditions began to shift. The rift between Ruby and her parents meant that side of the family was no longer an option. Kevin's parents, advancing in age, found it increasingly difficult to host such large gatherings. Our celebrations became smaller and more intimate. The year before, we'd had one of my favorite Thanksgivings ever, just the eight of us at our house. Kevin, who had recently gotten into smoking meats, produced a turkey that was nothing short of miraculous. Ruby's homemade rolls filled the house with a comforting yeasty aroma. I took charge of the mashed potatoes, determined to make them creamy and lump free. Chad's contribution was unique. He decided to make a giant pot of queso, which seemed like a great idea until it solidified into a cheesy brick within minutes of being served. We teased him mercilessly, but there was a genuine affection in our laughter. It became one of those cherished family moments I'd hold on to. I wish we could have just had a repeat of the previous year. But with Jody around, I knew it was unlikely. I pictured her at the head of our dining table and our resident psychic vampire gorging herself on turkey. My dog is trying to balance himself so he can look out the window. It was so cute. What are you doing, buddy? You've got stuff in your My mother crowing by her side, my father silently pushing mashed potatoes around his plate as my siblings and I cast awkward glances at one another. Hi, Sherry, just letting you know we're all going to Jody's house for Thanksgiving this year, Ruby relayed in a phone call. Nope, I blurted. I could have handled Thanksgiving at our home with Jody, but I would have rather gouged out my own eyeballs with a spoon than step foot in Jody's house. Hard pass. Invitation declined. Return to sender. Every cell in my body was telling me to stay away. An awkward silence as Ruby indig- indignation revved up like a chainsaw. Did you just say nope? I can't make it, unfortunately, Mom. Thank you for the invitation. I could almost see the gears turning in Ruby's head as she processed the fact that her eldest daughter was defying her. Error 404, obedient daughter not found. Sorry, Mom. It's a 4-hour drive to Jody's, and I have a ton of homework I need to do this weekend. A pause while Ruby decided how mad she wanted to be. Your siblings will be disappointed, she said, and I noticed how she didn't include herself in that sentiment. But I didn't care. Honestly, I would have rather spent Thanksgiving slurping instant ramen alone. In the end, I wound up going to Kevin's parents' house close by in Ogden and watching the Andy Griffith show on TV while eating store bought snacks and Stouffer's macaroni and cheese. I picked at the remnants of my meal. My eyes darted to the basement door. Grandpa, I said, setting down my bowl, can I look at the old family photos, the ones you keep in the basement? Grandpa's eyes lit up. Of course, Sherry, I'd be happy to grab them. As he stood up, Grandma called out, don't be down there for too long. I'm putting the pie in the microwave. Grandpa brought upstairs a folder and set it on a small table, gesturing for me to sit as he opened it. I was met with a stern gaze of a man with piercing eyes. Who's that? I asked, slightly unnerved by the intense stare of the guy in the photo. Well, that's your great great grandfather, Grandpa said proudly. An orphan came over from Germany, aged 18, right before the Nazis took over. Landed in New York with his sister, headed straight to Salt Lake City to find him a wife and settle down. He was the first in our family to be baptized into the church. I leaned in, studying the photo. Why isn't he smiling? Grandpa chuckled. People didn't smile in photos back then. Too long of an exposure time. He glanced up at me, his eyes softening. Sherry, why didn't you want to do Thanksgiving with your family this year? I bit my lip, considering my words carefully. Because I wanted to be here with you guys. Grandpa's brow furrowed. Sherry, is everything okay at home? Really okay? Yes, Grandpa, everything's fine. Really. I lied. I don't get to see you and Grandpa as often as I'd like, that's all. Grandpa studied my face for a long moment, and I held my breath, afraid he'd see through my facade. Finally, he nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. Well, we're always happy to have you here, sweetheart, he said, patting my hand. Anytime you want to visit, my door is open. I swallowed hard, fighting back the sudden urge to cry. Thanks, Grandpa. That means a lot. Part of me wished I had the courage to tell him the truth, but for now, at least, I could pretend that everything was normal, that I was just a granddaughter enjoying time with her grandparents on a cozy Thanksgiving afternoon. And for that, I was truly grateful. Chapter 29, Jingle Hell. This must be about Christmas. I may have escaped Thanksgiving with Ruby and Jody, but I wasn't out of the woods just yet. Christmas was just around the corner, which would mean another 2 whole weeks sleeping on the couch. My mom and Jody acting like giggling schoolgirls in matching Christmas sweaters, filming their preachy, hateful connections videos in my bedroom in front of the little mural I'd painted in between daily Dairy Queen runs. The day the semester ended, I showed up at the house. Chad greeted me at the door with a sympathetic look and a whisper, "Hey, sis, welcome to hell." The atmosphere in the house was somehow even stranger than I'd remembered. My dejected father was now sleeping alone in the marital bedroom with Ruby and Jody permanently installed upstairs in my room. Ruby, on the other hand, was full of Christmas cheer, hugging me and saying how thrilled to have me home, insisting that she and Jody take me and my two eldest sisters out to dinner for a welcome home girls' night. Jody really wants to feel closer to you, Ruby said, smiling in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. Sure, I said. What time are we going out to dinner? Well, let's leave here at 7. Sound good? 7 o'clock rolled around and no sign of Ruby or Jody. I could still hear them laughing up in my room. Meanwhile, I was starving. Figuring dinner plans were off, I made spaghetti for myself and my siblings and plopped down on the couch, throwing on Order of the Phoenix. Around 8 o'clock, Ruby and Jody came downstairs, all dressed up. All right, girls, we're ready to go, Ruby chirped. We already ate, I said from the couch, my eyes glued to the wizards battling on the screen. Excuse me? You committed that you were going to go out with us. Ruby was incandescent with rage. I looked up at her. Well, Mom, isn't one of the principles of truth being on time? I said coolly. Mic drop. Shari, if you'd ever pay attention in your sessions with Jody, you'd know that another important principle is that you need to be flexible in your relationships, which is why I went ahead and made my own dinner tonight. Very flexible. I could see the shock in my mother's eyes that I would dare answer her back in this manner in front of Jody, no less. Your poor future husband, Shari. I feel sorry for him. Good luck finding a man who wants a selfish wife like you. There she was again, wielding my apparent unmarriageability like a weapon. Any aesthetic mishap, any hint of individuality, any flicker of rebellion was so often met with the same crushing refrain. How would any man want to marry a girl like you? I glanced over at my dad, who was shuffling past, mumbling something about spark plugs, as if Ruby, with her own disintegrating marriage, was the arbiter of maritable bliss. I knew her taunts of unmarriageable were nothing but poisoned arrows designed to unalive my self worth and keep me small and compliant, and I no longer cared. Ruby, sensing that her usual insults weren't having the desired effect, changed track. May I remind you, you're only invited here as a guest, Shari. This isn't your home, it's mine. And frankly, I don't want you in it if you're going to talk to me like this. Then uninvite me, I said, voice sharp. I'm serious, Mom. Just say the word and I'll walk right out of the door. Save you the trouble of enduring Christmas with your inflexible daughter. I stood up, more than ready to grab my things and leave, but Ruby, true to form, wouldn't let me have the last word. I can't take this ABUSC, she wailed. Voice pitched to shatter windows. She bolted for the door, Jody rushing after her. I stood there, caught between laughter and tears. The absurdity of it all. My mother playing the victim card while holding all the cards, as she always had. Ruby and Jody went to dinner on their own without any of us. My sisters and I finished the movie, and honestly, I was absolutely thrilled to have them to myself without Ruby and Jody's negative energy in the house. After the kids went to bed, I decided to wait up for my mother and Jody to come home. Might as well face the music sooner rather than later. maybe try to clear the air. We had to spend the holiday together after all. Close to midnight, Ruby and Jody walked into the house, both of them sobbing uncontrollably. "What's wrong?" I gasped, genuinely alarmed. "Did something happen?" Jody looked at me with tearful, bloodshot eyes, whimpering. "Your fight with your mother, it reminded me of my daughter. She left me. There's no greater pain than being abandoned, Shari. You can't do that to Ruby. She loves you more than anything in the world." Her words found their mark. I imagine what it would feel like truly walking away from Ruby, despite all the heartache she had caused me. Would the hurt she caused me every day be less than agony of never being able to see her again? And how would Ruby feel if I shut her out forever? Suddenly, I realized I was crying too. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered, tears rolling down my cheeks. "I never meant to hurt you. I'll never talk to you like that again." They engulfed me in a suffocating embrace. "We're so glad you're home, Shari," Ruby whispered, and I noticed how wrong it felt being held by the both of them. Chapter 30. Children are not entitled to a magical childhood. A few days after Christmas, the adults gathered us children in the living room, Ruby and Jody addressing the four oldest of us, relegating my two youngest siblings to a corner. "We're making you aware of something," Ruby began, her tone unnervingly calm. "Your youngest siblings won't be receiving any presents this year." I glanced at my youngest siblings. Their faces were pictures of dejection and confusion. Christmas should be magical for children, a time to feel cherished and celebrated. The punishment felt cruel and vindictive. "Furthermore," Jody continued, her voice hardening, "they must ask permission before speaking to any of you. If they interrupt, you must reprimand them. This is non negotiable. We all need to present a united front to correct their behavior." What could they have possibly been doing so wrong to be like, have Christmas taken away, not be able to speak without permission? Like, that's crazy. "If they're not getting presents, none of us should," I interjected, my voice trembling with anger. "It's not right for us to open gifts while they watch empty handed." Jody's eyes narrowed. "Shari, your discomfort shows that you're struggling with the consequences of their actions," she said, her tone dripping with condensation. Oh, is that condensation? I don't know. "Yes, I am," I admitted firmly. "Do you want your siblings to remain entitled? Do you understand the suffering that mindset will cause them later in life?" As always, Jody had a knack for making me feel like I was always the one in the wrong. A few days later, on Christmas morning, 8 plus 1 passengers gathered around the Christmas tree to open their gifts. The presents beneath the tree looked a little thin on the ground this year, and we all knew why. "Now, everyone, open up your presents, and in doing so, give the young ones the gift of this precious, beautiful lesson that will serve them for years to come." As the eldest sister, every fiber of my being screamed to protect my siblings, but standing there, dwarfed by Jody and Ruby's united front of adult authority, I felt microscopic, impotent, useless. Yeah, she was literally taking everything joyful away from them. Like even Christmas presents and the ability to speak. Like what? We opened our Christmas presents while my two youngest siblings watched, wide eyed and silent. When the fury of torn paper settled, Jody's saccharine voice cut through the air. "Clean this up," she ordered them. As they wordlessly gathered the debris, Jody launched into a sermon, her face glowing with self satisfaction. Children are not entitled to a magical childhood, she cooed, each word dripping with poisonous sweetness. You can't just expect love and presence. Many have nothing at all. White hot rage boiled within me, searching desperately for an outlet. How had I let it come to this? I was supposed to be their guardian angel, their rock. Instead, I was a silent bystander, no better than my mute, nodding father. The voice of the widow of Nauvoo echoed in my mind. Burn it all down, Sherry. I knew I wanted to somehow. I'd always felt an invisible protector badge pinned on my soul, a responsibility I tried deeply, desperately to fulfill. But how could I be their safe haven when I was drowning in the same storm? Shortly after New Year's, I fled back to college, my survivor's guilt a lead weight in my chest. As I unpacked in my dorm room, the truth hit me. I'd abandoned my siblings to face the emotional apocalypse alone. I'd been thrown a life preserver while the ones who needed me the most remained in treacherous waters. I swam in that guilt for a week or so until a text from Kevin heralded new hope on the horizon. Jody's feeling better. She's moving back to Evans. I hesitated before typing. How's mom taking it? She's sad Jody's leaving, wishing she could stay, but Jody says she's ready to go home. I could picture Ruby's reaction, the facade of supportive friend coupling to reveal the desperate clinging need beneath. Jody had been her toxic lifeline, her twisted mirror of validation. Now, with 4 hours of desert between them, what would fill that void? A chill ran through me as I realized the likely answer: us, her offspring. She'd take her feelings out on us, as she always had. Based on the way she'd behaved over Christmas, drunk on Jody's empowerment, I imagined things might even get worse. I worried about the youngest ones who were least able to fight back. Still, a spark of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, this separation would force some much needed change. With Kevin there with Kevin there to watch the little ones, perhaps Ruby would spend more time in Evans with Jody, giving us all some crucial breathing room. In which case, Jody's departure might just be the best thing that could have happened. I would certainly return home more often to be there for my siblings if it didn't mean suffocating under Ruby's presence. And being home would maybe mean I could get away from Derek. Things had escalated physically. He said he was training me for marriage, showing me things I would need to do in order to please my future husband. Never all the way, he'd insist, as if this boundary made his actions noble. But he insisted on practicing everything else he said I would have to do as a wife if I wanted to keep my husband happy. Your husband is going to be so disappointed on your wedding night if you are uncomfortable being touched like this, he'd say. See how you flinch when I do that? You don't want to do that in front of your husband, do you? No, you're right, I'd say, convincing myself that this was some kind of exposure therapy meant to help me get over my issues and be a better wife. I pretended it wasn't happening. I kept my feelings hidden deep inside, but slowly and surely I noticed the colors of my world fading into shades of gray. Depression crept up on me once again, and suddenly I didn't seem to care about anything anymore, other than getting my homework done and making sure Derek wasn't upset with me. How was your day? What are you doing? Who are you with? Hello, miss you. Every day, his messages came in a relentless stream every 15 minutes like clockwork. I want to make sure you're safe, Sherry, he'd say. Maybe you could share your location with me just in case something goes wrong. I know you're all alone. I wasn't all alone. I had friends, and Kevin was on campus most days, but I was so hungry for any scrap of fatherly attention, any hint that someone truly gave a damn about me, that I'd agreed to share my iPhone location with him without a second thought. Before long, Derek turned into Big Brother, tracking my every move, grilling me about every little detour or pit stop. Parties, forget it. Boys, not a chance. A single moment of peace, absolutely out of the question. His messages took on a new tone, filled with longing and desire. Reading those words made me want to hurl. They also forced me to face the reality of what his interest in me was about. But even then, I made excuses, remained in denial. I couldn't make myself cut the cord. On one hand, his attention made me deeply uncomfortable. On the other, it was the only form of support I had in my tumultuous world. The contradiction tore at me, leaving me paralyzed and unable to act. He's the only protection I have. I repeated this like a mantra, even as a part of me screamed that this protection came with a terrible price. Without him, I really would be all alone. The truth hovered at the edges of my consciousness, too terrifying to fully acknowledge. Cutting ties with Derek meant facing a world where I was truly had no allies. And so I remained in limbo, caught between revulsion and desperate need, unable to break free. As Derek's grip on me got tighter, I felt myself shutting down more and more. I became skittish, secretive. I stopped going to the dining hall, scared to death of running into someone who might start asking questions I couldn't answer. I cut off my roommates, quit my clubs, let any hint of my social life wither up and die. Dark circles bloomed under my eyes, and I turned into a ghost girl, washed out and hollowed eyed, jumping at every buzz from my phone. Sometimes I'd hover my fingers over my phone case, knowing what I needed to say. Derek, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I'm not your doll. I'm not your pet, your plaything, your anything. I'm my own person. And then I delete it. Every word. It was easier to stay silent and play along than say something that would upset him. It sounds to me like he was a perv, like a PDF file. Like, why are you, this grown ass man, um touching and trying to manipulate this very, very vulnerable girl? Like, she was vulnerable. He obviously knew that she needed like a loving, parental, empathetic person in her life, and he totally took advantage of that. What a dick. Ugh. Amelia, it sounded like she didn't like totally get like vaginally assaulted, but it does sound like she got assaulted in other ways, like everywhere else aside from her vaginal parts. Yes, it was definitely grooming. They do, Buffy. It's like they can sense it. But you know why? They know it's because when you are vulnerable like that, you are carrying a certain type of energy where you are just looking for someone to validate you. And you're that kind of desperate need for attention is what attracts the dangerous predators to you. Marilyn, I believe that. I truly believe that it's worse in the church. I feel terrible for everything that she's gone through. Like, she's gone through a lot. I can't imagine that it gets worse. but we know that it does. Like, we already know that it gets worse than what she's already experienced and what we've read. Um, and it hurts my soul to know that, like, yes, like, in a way, I know that she feels guilty for not being able to help her siblings, but imagine those siblings in the house and how desperate they must have felt for someone to help them. Not even their own father was listening to the things that were going on around them. So they probably truly felt like they had nobody that they could trust. Those poor kids. Like, I hope that they're doing okay now. I hope that they're getting the therapy that they so need, because living through this is traumatic. Yeah. Where was I mean, but it's like you can't save everyone in the sinking ship, you know? In order And I know it's hard, but when you're on the plane, they tell you if something happens, take your oxygen mask, put it on yourself first before you help someone else. So, like, you have to get yourself out of the situation before you can get anyone else out of the situation. Like, you have to make sure that you're out and that you're okay and able to process, like, what the fuck just happened to you, because that was a lot. I mean, what were Jody and her mom up there doing in her bedroom? Having, like, seances, like casting out demons and doing, like, sexual things with one another? Like, what the fuck were they doing? No, the religious ones are the worst. And when I say religious, I mean like follow the Bible, like religious. Because I feel like there's a big difference between religious and spiritual. Like, I would call myself more spiritual because I'm more in tune with energies and frequencies and the flow of life, whereas I'm not focused heavily on biblical scripture. And I feel like religion focuses heavily on biblical scripture and, like, taking pieces of the Bible and using it to manipulate you into doing things that they want you to do, or into not doing things that they don't want you to do, but they manipulate the scripture so that it serves their purpose rather than reading the scripture as is. I'm so sorry. I left whenever I got pregnant when I was 14. So, but then I was, like, back and forth. It was like a bad relationship with my first child's father and my mother. So I was, like, back and forth between two toxic relationships from the time I was 14 to the time I was 21, just, like, jumping back and forth. My mom would kick me out, so I would go back to his house. He would kick me out, so I'd go back home. She would kick me out, so I'd go back there. He'd kick me out, so I'd go back home. And it was just like this constant back and forth for years. It was so toxic, so chaotic, so abusive. Like, it was it was rough. I've had, like, if you think her life has been rough, you don't even want to hear the story I have. Like, not to compare, because you can't compare stories. Everybody's situation is different. Mine is definitely a lot more physically abusive and verbally abusive than the emotional and psychological that she was going through. So there's different aspects, but some are kind of the same. Anyways, I need to get in the shower. It's already 9:30, and I don't have to get up too early for work in the morning because I have a son with my appointment in the morning. Yes, Linda, I got your email. I'm looking at it right now. Okay, cool. You guys, we will be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will figure out what's going on with the movie so that we can watch the movie. That's what my second husband, I mean, my first husband did. So I had three significant relationships in my life. The guy that I was with, my first child's father, and I was with him from the time I was 14 until I was 21. And then my first husband was when I was 23 to 28. And then my second marriage was when I was 29 through 2 years ago. And each one of them were abusive in different ways. But my first husband, the second, relationship that I was in, he was very religious. So he was all about reading the Bible, memorizing scripture, and like using scripture to manipulate you, to make you feel like you were less than, to make you feel like you weren't good enough. It was very, very psychologically controlling and manipulative. But that's what religion, I feel like that's what religion is all about. I feel like religion is used as an emotional and psychological control form rather than actually preaching the love of Christ and following the teachings of Christ. I could definitely understand where you are coming from with that, Buffy. All right, let me go because I need to get in the shower. I love you guys. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming and hanging